Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're going to this Bava daf Pei Vav. We are going to begin on the bottom Pei Hamet Beis, 4 lines from the bottom. Boy Rabbi. So Rabbi poses the following question: Sheves, when it comes to among the 5 damages of Sheves having to pay for the amount of time a person was resting, hapoch sasoi bedamim mahu. So what is the din? Says Rashi, hikahu maka shehutzarach lishbois memolachto. You have a person who has to stop working because he was hit. The sofo leo shalim kivatchila, and then eventually he gets completely fine. Ve'in kan el sheves, and all there is left is sheves. So skipping to the next question, next Rashi, mahu mimachayev abchas damav. Do you have to pay for the deduction, the hashta or lo, of now or not? Hey Chadam, what does that mean? What exactly is this question? So kigon shehikahu al yadai. You hit a person on his hand, v'samta yado, and because of that, his hand shriveled up. So his hand was not functioning. V'sofo lachsor, and then afterwards it got better. My kibanda sofo lachsor lo yoim le'v'lamidi. Since the truth is he's going to be completely healed, so therefore maybe we should not give him the value of his hand. Or do we say now it's not functioning? So the question just in general is, how do we understand this? How do we understand this situation of how do we evaluate? Do we evaluate how he is now? Or do we evaluate the fact that his hand is going to get better anyway, so therefore maybe you shouldn't have to pay for the difference of a good hand and a bad hand. If his hand's going to be healed, it's going to be good anyway. So how do we figure this all out? It's one thing if you did a permanent injury, but over here, he's going to be 100% recovered. So the Gemara answers like this: Tashma, Hamaka v'imoi v'los b'hen chabura. Let's say you hit your parents, but you don't make a chabura. So you're not allowed to hit your parents, but if you didn't make a chabura, says Rashi, ain't alav chiyuv misa, you're not going to be sentenced to death. It's only, as it's brought down with the Sanhedrin, if you actually made a chabura, you actually caused some type of wound of significance, then you're going to be chayiv misa. And for that matter, it talks about someone who hit someone on Yom Kippur, in which you actually did make a bruise, but since it's on Yom Kippur, in which is not considered to be a chiyuv, it's not skila, it's a chiyuv kares. As we continue to pay vav, Aleph, chayiv b'kulon. You're chayiv on all the, Rashi says, all chamisha dmarim. You had to pay for all the nezek, sari, posheves, and boshes. Now, what exactly is this case where you did not make a chabura upon hitting your parents? Lav, is it not? Kigon shi kaho al yadai. You did hit them, however, soif lachsor, but it does heal. And nonetheless, we still have to pay for all of them. So we see clearly that even though someone has an injury that will heal, the din is you still have to pay for all chamisha devarim. So it doesn't matter, even though he's going to be completely healed. The reality is, the din is you are chayav to pay for everything. So this Gemara says, no, that's not what it's talking about. Amri hakamai skinan kigun shecher shoy v'lo sabachabura. We're talking about a situation where you deafened them and that you did not make a chabura that way. So Gemara says, if you deafen your father in the herag, the person is sentenced to death. Certainly if you cause damage in the ear, there's also chabura going on inside the ear. After all, tifta dedama nafale bu'udne. There's no question that there's blood and other damage inside the inner ear. So the fact that you damaged by deafening, you screamed at them and you deafened them, that's still a chabura. So that can't be the case of no chabura. We're talking about a situation where you shaved him, which is not a chabura, right? I don't have a beard. It's not a chabura if I shave, but you lessened his value, so to speak. He's not as respected. So gilcha, one second. If he shaves, meheder hadar, his beard will come back. Bahanu ba'ain. That's precisely the same question. You did something to a person which lowered their value in some way, and not having a beard, again, you have to imagine why this person would have a greater respect and value with a beard, which makes sense in a lot of very religious circles. So to have a beard, Rosh Hashiva, shave his beard, it's like it's a busha a little bit. But it's going to grow back. So it's the same thing as hitting someone, his arm shrivels, and then it gets healed. So Amri Hakbain Skin could go in Shisachai Nasha Doloi Hadar. So we're talking at a case, says Rashi, Sam Hamashir Saseir. You didn't just take an electric shaver, but you put some type of medicine, some like laser removal of, which I guess nowadays that's what it would be more like. But here it's like some type of ointment, and because the way it works is it causes that the hair just will never come back. So in that situation, it's not like our case in which the hand does completely recover. So again, Doloi Hadar says back Lamar. Sar di Isle Kartufni Bereshe Vitsavche Mahani Tar Kartufne. So when it comes to the cracks, he's going to be screaming out, which is a tremendous, cause him pain because of this ointment or some type of cream, whatever it is, that will hurt him due to all the cracks or all the pores in his skin. Ribuy de boy asuye. He's going to need to go to the doctor to address the pain that he's suffering. Sheves dahavi markid bekubi de boy machve gavi reshe vo machve mahanhi tar kartufni. So what exactly is the sheves? So if someone who is marakid b'chaniyos, he would dance in markets. Rashi says, Mara ninua barosho. They see his head. Ulharos mini schoi kederch helitzanim. It looks like a clown. The hashda anshias rapi hanach kartufni, until all these cracks on his face are healed. Lomatzi machve. He can't show his face basically. Valfal pi shlo bitl mishar malacha. Noisel shev zu hoyo malachta b'kach. So this guy has a job in which you can almost like imagine you do it to an actor, right? So his facial appearance is of great significance. So therefore, if you cause some problem, let's say you put this cream on which removes his beard, and all of a sudden it's not going to grow back, but also causes rashes and irritation. So he can't go into the public eye until all that is healed. And then Boshes, Enucha Boshes Gol Mizeh. It's pretty interesting. There's no greater element of Boshes, of Busha, than having your beard shaved off. Which is kind of hard to understand, but that's, at least in those days, maybe it's not so hard to understand. Now, Mills to the Boyle Rabba. Again, this is a question that Rabba posed, which we did not yet answer. Again, let's remind ourselves. The person hit the person's hand, it shrivels, it comes right back. Do you pay all the 5 things or not? So Rabba didn't know, but Pshitale Abaye. Abaye thought it was quite easy lahachgisa. On one side, the Rebbe hachgisa. So Rabba doesn't know the answer. Abaye has an answer, Rabba has an answer, but their answers are on the opposite sides. Ditmar, he called Yadav Asam this precise question. The hand shrivels and then it recovers. So Abaye Omer Noisel Shevas Gedayel Shevas Katana. So he says you have to pay a Shevas Gedayla, which Rashi says is Demei Yadai, the value of his hand, and almost Shevas Katana, says Rashi, Kol Yomim Sheyipoil Lamishkov. Whenever he was lying down in bed, Roy Noisakil Shemer Kishuin. So according to Abaye, you have to pay everything basically. Rabbi Omer, you only have to pay for his days of rest, and therefore you don't have to pay for Yemei Yadai. You don't have to Demei Yadai, because why should you pay the difference between a good hand and a bad hand when his hand becomes good again anyway? So why are you paying him that difference? So it's interesting. So you actually have three opinions. You have an opinion of I don't know. One is yes, you definitely pay the nezek in full. The other one says you don't pay except for the shevas. Itmar. So we learn like this: Hakoiteya yad eved ivri. A person cuts the hand, which means his hand is completely severed, which obviously means that ein soif lachsor. It's not coming back. So it's not the same as our case. The case is different. So in this situation, Hakoiteya yad eved ivri shel chaveroi. By oimer nois l'shavas gadol le'eved. You have to pay. This is not an eved kanani. It's an eved ivri. So you have to pay the shavas gadola to the eved because it's not like gufa kanoi. So therefore, you have to pay the eved ivri for the damages, the difference between having a hand, not having a hand. With shavas katan l'rav, but the master, he's the one who's losing out. Also because now his eved can't work. So because he can't work, or he has to be healed, so therefore you have to pay again the amount for being a shemer kashuan. He can still be a shemer kashuan even without a hand. Rabbi Omer hakol yinasin le'eved. Actually, everything should be given to the eved. Again, it makes sense. The damages, the sheves, which is kind of a little bit harder to maybe understand, he's of the opinion that everything should also go to the eved. However, what happens is that he will take with that money, he'll purchase land, and the Rav is able to get peros, get the fruit. Because just like, if you will, the Eved Ivri is like karka, and therefore his work is like peros through the fruit of his hands, if you will. So therefore, the Rav should at least be able to get the peros. Pshita piches etzel atzmo ve'etzel rabo lo piches. We can understand that the deductions are for the Eved, and for the master, it has not been deducted. Hey, now what does that mean? Depaske l'reish udne. If let's say you hurt his ear, or l'reish nechire, or his nose, hakol atzmo. In that situation, certainly everything will go to him himself because he can still work, and all you did was you caused obviously some element, an element of damage because he's lacking a part of his nose, if you will. So you still have to pay for nezek. Piches etzel rabo pluta debai b'rabba. As you said, if let's say there is something in which there's a loss to the master, as we said, it's a machlokas abai and rabba, which we just established whether or not the master should get the sheves, or it's all given to the Eved and he purchases karka for himself, but the master is entitled up until he's freed for the peros. So with that said, let's continue with question 9. Hakotei yad Eved ivri shel chavero l'mi mishalem nezek v'sheves. So according to Abaye, he says the nezek goes to the Eved and the sheves should go to the master. Rabbi says everything should be given to the Eved, but then he'll purchase land and the Rav will eat peros. Okay. So the question TA14. Gilach es chaveroi batar. You shave your friend with a razor, o shesachle nasha, or you put on this, which in that case his hair will grow back, or you put some type of ointment on his hair, on his beard, that it loses his beard and does not come back. Im chayev mishum nezek uvamazat taloi. So, if we're talking about bitar with a razor, it's a machlokus in that situation because it will grow back. Hezek shesayfa lachsar chashiv hezek. Is a hezek which will come back, is it a hezek? However, sacha nasaf, it's not going to grow back, everyone holds you are chayiv in that situation. That's TA 14. Okay, so again, it's a machlokas as we established. He kahu al yadov it sums of a seifel laxor, so it's a machlokas abai and Rabba. That's in that situation, which is similar to shaving the beard, which we said is v'hainu be'en. However, in the event where you put on Shesachu Nasha, Deloy Hadar, is that situation, everyone hold you would be, in fact, Chayiv. Okay. Question TB14. Boy Rabba Sheves HaPoich Sai Bedamim Mahu. Ma Shato Rabba Ha'eboya. Ma Pashtu Rabba Ha'eboya. Not exactly sure what he's saying over here. What is the question, or what is he trying to be? How is he trying to be poishet the shaila? So let's see what I wrote over here. Sometimes it just asks you to tell you the question. So I wrote, "Hu enu chayv l'shalim zed davar kashel l'chad man demer pshitol rabba olama v'loimed mechavalala." Okay, I don't know. I'm not sure what I wrote over there. It doesn't, and I put a star, which meant I don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so the question is what's the question, or is it trying to learn out by chayvel b'chavero, by being hamake of the imo v'lo also b'hen chabura? Maybe that's the. But again, we said that's not necessarily the case because we're talking about with a beard. Okay, all right, let's continue. So the last of the 5 things is embarrassing someone. So the busha, it all depends on who you are and who that person is. So mani masnisin lo Reb Meir or Behuda el or Shimoni did not. The kulan roino sekil heim bnei chayrin shiardu min nechseihem shehin bnei Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov. We look at everyone. Everyone is basically the same level as far as Bosh's payment is concerned. There's no difference. Everyone has to pay. You have to pay everyone the exact same amount, which of course is not what the Mishnah says. Then we just here he says you have to look as though everyone's a bnei chayrin. You're all like a free yid, and you're bnei Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov. Okay, that's the language. That's Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer hagadol fi gadloi v'katlan fi katnoi, which sounds a little bit like our Mishnah. If you're great, so it's according to your greatness. If you're not so great, then you get less boishes. Shimon Omer Ashirim, when it comes to someone who's wealthy, we envision those people as though they are, people who are free, in which they basically lost their possessions. Aniyim kebchusin shebehen, and aniyim less than them. So mani, who's this like? Maybe Hashna Rameir. Certainly, it's not like Rameir, because masnisin katani hakolafim avashim was vayish. Rameir kuhu bahadi hadadi ninu. He says everyone gets paid the exact same when it comes to Boshas, which is clearly not like our Mishnah, apparently. Now, the next 2 opinions may be like our Mishnah, but we say maybe not Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Huda masnisin katani hamavayish. That says yomachayiv. It says another thing. It says if you embarrass a blind person, you are going to be chayiv for that. He says elsewhere, this is obviously not from our Mishnah, but we'll see soon, we'll see that quote later on, that a blind person, there's no din busha. And therefore, obviously, if we're talking about one consecutive stam Mishnah, it can't be Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimoni. So it's possible you could really fit Rabbi Yehuda, but it's just the problem is the seifa. Now, if you look at Rabbi Yehuda, Kiyam Rabbi Yehuda, Sumin lo boshes. When do we say that a blind person has no boshes? Lemishkul minei, to take from him. We're not going to take from him. So if a blind person embarrasses you, there's no din boshes. However, when it comes to you embarrassing a blind person, yes, you're going to be chayiv for that. But it says, chayiv. If you embarrass someone who's sleeping, you're chayiv. V'yashin shebiyesh pater. Someone who is sleeping who embarrasses you, somehow he's sleeping and he maybe talks in his sleep, he does something which embarrasses you, he's pater. V'okatani suma shebiyesh pater. It doesn't mention also about a blind person. Such a contrast is not found by a blind person. We make this contrast by a sleeping person. So if there really is a distinction, we should make that distinction also by a blind person. It must be there is no distinction. It must be, and in fact, Rabbi Yehuda holds it's not true. When it comes to a blind person, you're always potter. If he embarrasses you, you embarrass him. Okay, therefore, that's the reason why the Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay. All right, let's continue. I think maybe I saw a question over here. Oh, yeah, question. Okay, here we go. This question's a little bit more clean. TB15. Hamavayesh suma o suma shabiyesh mahadin. Lofi Rabbi Yehuda pater b'chol tzad. Aviyesh machlokes im hamavayesh suma im chayv o pater Rabbi Yehuda o suma shabiyesh hu pater. Okay. All right, so that's pretty clear, and I said that. I think I answered that pretty cleanly. TB15. Okay, so that is the din. Suma in lo boshes, according to Rabbi Yehuda, or to Rabbi Yehuda says, and perhaps we may make a distinction of in lo boshes lo mishkumine of lo meisla le yavinin le, which Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold like, but maybe there is an opinion like that. Okay, weiter. So man tano hada tanarbam. Who's the tano of the following brisa? The schaven levayish as a cotton. If your intention was to embarrass a child, ubiyish as a gadol, you embarrass an adult. Nice and gadol demei boishta yishal cotton. You have to give the gadol the value of the busha that you would have had to pay had it been a cotton. Levayish as a eved. Your intention was to mevayish a slave. Ubiyish as ben chayrin. So again, just like a cotton, you can't embarrass a child, but for an adult, it's worse. At least in those days. And embarrassing an eved is wrong, but a ben chayrin is worse. So if you intended to embarrass a slave, but he ends up being a ben chayrin, noisel ben chayrin demei boish eved. Same thing. You pay the value of the lower amount because that's what your intention was. So mani Laura Meir Rabbi Yehuda Laura Shimon. Of course, it's not like any of these opinions. So katan bin nechasim gadol bin nechasim. When we say katan and gadol, we're not talking actually the way I just translated it. It just means someone who is big, a big fish, a rich guy, or a poor guy. So Rameir certainly doesn't sound like this because he always says everyone gets paid the same. Rabbi Yehuda also says, in addition to about a blind person, that there's no din boshes, there's also no din boshes by an eved. So if you're neschaven to mevayish an eved, but you're mevayish a ben chayrin, you would not pay, apparently, because you wouldn't pay for an eved. Rav Shimon says that you actually have to have kavana. If you're mevayish, your intention was to mevayish person A, if you're mevayish instead person B, then you're potter. So it's not like any of them. So my taima, what is the reason for this? Because he holds it's katala. It's just like when it comes to killing. Ma katala adam achayvin lei. When it comes to killing, it's when you have intention. Until you have intention. In other words, when it comes to like being sentenced to death, right? It has to be, the din is, if you're in nischav, we saw elsewhere, also in Sanhedrin, in nischav l'hargazeh v'hargazeh, potter. If your intention was to kill one person, you end up killing the other person, so you're not going to be sentenced to death for that. That was not considered to be an act of like premeditated murder because you end up killing the wrong person. It's still wrong and it's still a crime, but you're not going to be punished with a death penalty. So it's the same thing. You actually have to have intention. That she stretched out her hand and grabbed hold of his embarrassment. So therefore the problem is it's not like anyone. So how do we understand this brisa? So the Gemara says like this. So Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe the only time, this is what we said by the blind person, maybe the only time we said regarding a slave, there's no din busha, is l'meisvulhu. It just means to take from him. In other words, if an eved embarrasses you, the eved doesn't pay you. However, when it comes to, it's a little bit different in the lashon over there. It said here it's But when it comes to you paying, we will do the evaluation. So it's possible to make that distinction. Maybe it's even like Rameir. Now Rameir said there's no distinction at all. No, me savard gadol nechasim kadam nechasim. What makes you think we're talking about rich versus poor, and that we make a difference between a rich and a poor person? Lo, gadol mamish v'katan mamish. It has to do with being an adult or a kid. So 1 second, v'katan bar boishasu. You're telling me, is it possible that there's any busha at all when it comes to a child? So he knows like this. Maybe Rameir doesn't make a distinction between rich and poor when we're both adults, but he does make a distinction between a gadol and a katan. But 1 second, but a katan is no din busha, right? Wrong, because yes, there actually is busha. K'd papa demi kalmule umikalim. So he says that actually they could be embarrassed, and it could embarrass the mishpacha, which embarrasses them, etc. Embarrassing by them is embarrassing the mishpacha. Hachinami, as we continue to pay Bava midbeis, dimi kalmu le umikalim. Says Rashi up top, kishi maskirin lo boshes machlimin osoba mitzdair. Like when they finally recognize the embarrassment, then they're going to be in pain because of it. Okay, so it's possible. Now, it's interesting why the Gemara doesn't ask the same question. Do we, in fact, see this distinction when it comes to an Eved? Like we saw the distinction when it comes to a person sleeping. Gemara doesn't entertain that thought for some reason. Okay. In that case, let's continue. Let's continue with the next mission. Says the Masnisim. Someone who embarrasses someone who is naked. You embarrass someone who is blind. You embarrass someone who is sleeping. In all these cases, you're still chayev. So again, we see this distinction. If a person who's asleep somehow embarrasses someone awake, that person who's asleep is not held responsible. Nafal minagag, if a person fell off of a roof, the hizik and damaged someone, ubiesh, and also embarrassed them because of the injury, chayev al nezek. So he's going to have to pay for the damages. Upater al boishas, but he does not have to pay for the boishas. Why? Because it's ad shehem eschavin. When it comes, as we've seen this before, you have to actually have kavana. Boishas is the one thing that you must be meschavin for. Okay, but we'll understand this better in a sec. Okay, says the Gemara. Tanuban. So bishoy arum chayev. V'enu daima bisho arum ubisho lavush. So the truth is, if you embarrass someone who is naked, you are chayev, but it's not the same as someone who is clothed. Bishu bebeis hamerchatz chayev. V'enu daima bishu bebeis hamerchatz bishu l'shuk. You embarrass someone who is in a bathhouse, you're also chayev, but it's not the same as someone embarrassing someone in public in the street. So Amar Mar, what do you mean? Bisho arum chayev, arum bar boishasu. What do you mean? Is someone who's naked someone capable of being embarrassed? Amar Rav Papa, my arum. What does it mean, arum? It doesn't mean naked. It means the asa zika kirachinhu lemane. There was a wind that came and it blew his clothes a little bit. He was wearing some type of toga, and it caused some of his, let's say, part of his legs to be exposed because of the wind. Yasahu dalinhu tfei. You ended up taking the garment and lifting it even higher. Ubishe, and you embarrassed him. Bishu bebeis hamerchatz chayev, beis hamerchatz bas boishasu. Same bar boishasu. Is that a place to be embarrassed? Amar Papa, shabishu al gav hanahar. It was by the river. So because of that, that is a place in which is typical for a person to go, and therefore you could be mavayish there. Boy Rav Abba bar Mamel, bishu yashin umeis mahu. What happens if you embarrass the person who's asleep, which again maybe you're chayav to pay, but then the guy dies in his sleep? Mahu. So maybe the guy will never have known that he was embarrassed. They embarrassed him. My kimaboy. What's the question? So Amar Rav Zvid talking kimaboy. This is the question. Mishum kisufahu. Is it because that you embarrassed him and his face turned colors because he's all embarrassed now? V'hames lay, he died. V'leis lay kisufa. So there's no embarrassment because he never knew he was embarrassed because he died before he woke up. It's because you degraded him, and therefore in the eyes of other people, you still degraded him, even though he didn't even realize that he was being degraded, but he was degraded, and therefore you would still be chayiv. So that's the question. Tashma. Rameir says, and the focus is on a katan. Even not just a cherish, but also a katan. There's the din boishas that if you're mavayish a katan, you're chayiv. Shaita ein lo boishas. When it comes to a shaita, not. So iyamr bishlama mishum zelusa. Is it because of degrading, even though they may not realize that you're still chayiv? Hainu tani katan. It makes sense. A katan may not really understand what happened. They're not embarrassed. They're just walking around. They don't realize, but it's still. Everyone else is looking at them in a different way. So even though the kid is not, does not have the emotional intelligence and is socially aware that should be embarrassed by something, but everyone else realizes what he did was wrong, and therefore that should be enough. So we see clearly a raya, if this person was sleeping and died, you should still be chayav, just like the katan. A little child is not a bar boishas. Elamai mishum zilusa. You want to tell me because of being degraded? I feel shaitanami. When it comes to a shaita, he also can be degraded, right? When you have a shaita and you embarrass him, so he doesn't understand, but you still degraded him. People are not going to look at him in a more lowly fashion. And sadly, Amri shaita in the baishas gadol mizu. There's no lower level than a shaita. In other words, if a person's a shaita, there's nothing that could happen that anyone's going to look any lower for this person. They understand this person is mentally deranged, rachmanos, that this is how this person is. So therefore, no one's going to look at them lower because of what you did. So therefore, there's not going to be any element of zilusa. We call makom nifshat minei de mishum zilusa hu. We can let's for the kasha because it's clear it must be zilusa because the imishim kisufa. Katan bar kisufa hu. We know that a katan is not a bar kisufa, right? So as we said before, no, it's not true. It's possible that they are bar kisufa. Kediyam rapapa. De mechalmu le mechalim hachanami de mechalmu le mechalim. So it is shaykh for even a katan to develop an element of to have this issue of kisufa, of being embarrassed, even though they may not necessarily be aware, but it's possible that they can become aware because of, okay. This is actually the question. Is it because of his own embarrassment? And he died, so he doesn't have his own embarrassment. Maybe because it's an embarrassment of the entire family. You've embarrassing him, even though he died afterwards, you still cause a humiliation to that person's family, and therefore you're still going to be chayiv. Tashma. So again, we're going to use the same statement. Shaita ein lo boishas. It's because the family's embarrassed. Tani katan. Because even if a katan isn't embarrassed, but you doing this could embarrass their family. Katan bar boishasu. It's shaykh that a katan is bar boishas. Elomai what? Mishum boishas the bnei mishpacha. So because of the family, if you're shaitanami, so you should be chayiv because if you're mavayish a katan you're chayiv. So you should be mavayish a shait. You should also be chayiv because you're embarrassing the family. Shaita ein lo boishas gadol mizu. Again, the family already understands they have a member in their family who's a shaita. And therefore, that's the lowest that the person unfortunately can be. And therefore, you embarrassing them doesn't do anything. It's not going to cause any change in the family. Again, it must be because boishas mishpacha. Di mishum kisufa katan bar kisufahu. So again, we say it for the third time. Yes, it's shaykh that a child can accept embarrassment for themselves. The michamule michlam, that they basically recognize this embarrassment, they become embarrassed. Vosanya, we learn as follows: Rabbi oimer cherish yesh lo boishas. A cherish, there is boishas. Shaita ein lo boishas. Katan, and this is the line: pamim yesh lo, pamim ein lo. Depends. So if they don't understand, then you're not chayav, because the whole chiyuv is dafka on kisufa, on their own embarrassment. So if they are not able to comprehend it, or no one explains it to them, or they don't figure it out, so there was no boshas. Okay, question 10. Be'elu fanim ikad dafka mina iboishes hu mishum kisufa or mishum zilusa. So either bias yashan umes, this is the whole question. You embarrass someone who's asleep and they die asleep, or you're mavayish a katan and he's not embarrassed. He has no idea basically what happened. Okay. All right, let's keep on moving. Mavayish is asuma. So we said again, if you embarrass a blind person, so masnis no Rabbi Yehuda, as we already established. What's Rabbi Yehuda? Design Rabbi Yehuda imer suma in lo boishas. There's no din of busha when it comes to a blind person. The kachay Rabbi Yehuda paiter mechavi golias, mechavi malkias, mechavi misas beistan. So too when it comes to all these other punishments, he says that there's no din by a blind person. So my time Rabbi Yehuda, gamrei nechei nechame edim zaymin. He learns that exer shava. When it comes to edim zaymin, ma hasam sumin lo avhacha sumin lo. So if we're dealing with edim zaymin, it has to be obviously that they have the ability to see, right? Says Rashi, the lo Rabbi Yehuda, the armor suma in lo boshes im bayish chavera pater mastisa katani yashin. Okay, so the edim zaymin ksiv lo saksim inechal lo boishes nami ksiv lo katsasas kappa yefshir besumin to be in re'iyah. The im lo ra shekit the other shechavera hechiyed. There's no way you can testify. You have to be an eyewitness. You have to be able to see. So if you're blind, you can't be an aid. You can't be an edim zaymin. It's a practicality. It's not possible. So just like there's no din edim zaymin, so too there's no din chayvi misas beistin. Or actually here, avhacha sumin lo mechavi golias. The sanya blo rois. The pasuk says blo rois without sight. Prat l'suma divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rameir oimer rabos l'suma. When it comes to the din of going to Ari Miklat, if you kill b'shogeg, there's a machlokas whether or not a blind person will be chayiv. And this is the Gemara. Gemara is found numerous places, obviously in second parak of Makos. So my time to Rabbi Yehuda. Why does Rabbi Yehuda say a blind person's potter? Because he's telling you the pasuk says, actually yavos re'yar lachtaveitz. A person goes into a field, into a forest to chop wood. Now who can go out into a forest? Anyone. It's very inclusive. It includes even a blind person. But then then it says a more of exclusive part, and that statement without seeing is l'miyute. It's coming to exclude someone who can't see, namely a blind person. Therefore, a blind person is going to be potter from going to Guls. It's true. That pasuk excludes, but also because of Rachman b'vli das. The word bavli das, without knowledge, also excludes someone who did it intentionally. So that's also miyut. When you have a miyut and a miyut, it includes like a double negative. Because if all you needed to do was to be one miyut, then just say one miyut. If you have two, why do you have two? It's extra. It must be to tell you that it's really l'rabos. Because if you only have one, you would maybe think it's not a riboy, it's a miyut. Therefore, you have to have two miyutim to say no. It's not a miyut, it's really a riboy, which includes a blind person. So it's ein miyut rabbi. So how does Rabbi Yehuda do this? Rabbi Yehuda hahum b'bli das. When it says b'bli das, it's problem eschavin hudasa. It's coming to exclude someone who had kavana. As we said, if you have intention to kill, then you're obviously not going to go to the Ari Miklat, or you're not going to stay there, you're going to be sentenced to death, or you'll be put there without aid, etc. So that had to do, so again, we started off talking about the din of, that there's no din edim zaymin, and there's no din boshes, and there's also no din going to the Ori Miklat. And then we continue, because it's according to Rabbi Yehuda. Once you already know that a summa does not go to the Ori Miklat, to the city of refuge, if he kills b'shogeg, so too he's not going to have to be sentenced to death if he kills on purpose. Through Gzer Shava. Chavi Malkias, how do we know he won't get Malkus? Asir Rasha. Mechavi Misus Bastin. So there's another Gzer Shava. So it's A to B, B to C, but they're all linked, and therefore they're potter from all these cases. Tiny Edo Rabbi Yehuda Omer Summa in lo Boshes. We also learned that Summa, according to Rabbi Yehuda, has no Boshes. So we continue to pay Zion but Aleph. V'chein hoy Rabbi Yehuda Paiter Mikol Dinim Shabbatayra. He holds that they're potter from everything. My time Rabbi Yehuda, Samar Krav, Shavtu Ha'eda, Bein Hamake Uvein Goyel Hadam. So it talks about the dinim of the Goyel Hadam and the person who murdered, and he has to stay in the city of refuge, or else the person who murdered, his relative, the Goyel Hadam, can pursue him if he's outside of that city. Al Mishpatim O'ela. And it talks about all the laws, all the Mishpatim. So Kol Shishnu B'Makeh B'Goyel Hadam Yishnu B'Mishpatim. Anyone who's under the category of the dinim of having to go to the city of refuge has the dinim of Mishpatim. El HaMishpatim Asher Tasim Lifneihem. You have all these dinim. Kol She'enu B'Makeh B'Goyel Hadam Enu B'Mishpatim. However, someone who doesn't fall into the laws of Goyel Hadam doesn't have any mitzvahs either. He's not mechuyev in anything. Tani Ido Rabbi Yehuda Omer Suma Ein Lo Boshes. And therefore there's no din boishes either. So it's not just boishes, but all the mitzvos. Why does he say that a blind person is pater mikol b'koil? The pasuk says ve'elu hamitzvos v'chukim b'mishpatim. So kol sheishu b'mishpatim yeshu b'mitzvos v'chukim. Kol she'enu b'mishpatim enu b'mitzvos v'chukim. So we already established that he does not fall into the category of numerous laws, and therefore he's excluded from all the laws. Which again is interesting. Then, like, why do you need all these miyutim to tell you he's excluded from this, he's excluded from this, he's excluded from this? So the whole purpose of it is to basically say he's pater, but really the whole then would establish that he's pater from everything. But it's not a davar pashit just on our own svar that he should be pater. You need miyutim to be able to show that a blind person is pater, which not everyone holds. Rabbi Yosef Mereish, originally Rabbi Yosef was a saginar, he was blind. As Rashi points out, Rav Yosef said like this: Mareish initially haba mina mandi yemer halach Rabbi Yehuda yemer suma patamina mitzvahs. When someone would say that we hold like Rabbi Yehuda and you don't have to do mitzvahs, you don't have to do them. Which obviously, if you do them, you must be above and beyond. Therefore, kavdina yom etavul rabbanan. They made a big party. My timer, delay mipak dina. I'm not obligated to do any mitzvahs for kavdina mitzvahs, and I still do them. So you can imagine how much schar I get that I do even though I don't have to do. Is greater someone who is obligated to do the mitzvah than someone who's not obligated to do the mitzvah. So now if someone says the halacha is not like him, then I celebrate. My time the chi dina Isli agratve. Now that I do the mitzvahs, I get more rewards. It's all connected, so I really didn't want to stop in the middle there. So we went a little bit deeper than we normally do. Obviously, we're going to stop by that next Mishnah. Let's see. Do we have any other questions? So let's see. TA 15. Bavas hasmuch al shulchan. Okay, so there's no questions left here. Let's see if a Rabbi Gibbard question is left. I think it was all the way on the bottom. L'maskanas hagamara. Im poiter al nezek shloi pichsoi bedamim hech yiskin maka aviv l'chabura shechai benezek. So I said, if you smear a drug which makes him lose his hair forever, here you're chayiv. But if it comes back, maybe you're pater. Mahu kavanus Rabbi Yehuda k'sha'omer suma ein lo boshes. At first, only no boshes if he embarrassed someone, but if someone embarrassed him, he'd get money. Then he said, not much space, either way, the Mishnah means you're chayev, since it doesn't make chilukim. So when Yehuda says pater, he can't be going like this Mishnah Khan.